Well, welcome into Off the Bench here. Had a slow start to the day, but we are ready to go here on a Thursday here in the Queen City. We got a great show for you lined up. We're going to welcome on Xavier Musketeer head coach Richard Pitino in just a few moments. Later on, we're going to talk about Joseph Burrow and the comments that he made in his presser yesterday. And I will be honest with you guys, I don't know what to make of them. And we're going to have just quite honestly an open discussion about everything that Joseph Burrow said yesterday. We're also going to talk about the game this Sunday and the Michigan situation and who Michigan can have to replace Coach Moore. But that's coming on later on in the show. We are going to welcome in Xavier Musketeer head coach, Coach Richard Pitino. So thank you so much, Coach Patino, for joining us here on a Thursday.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's just start with this. I'm a Xavier fan. I've spent many evenings at Dana Gardens. One of my favorite things that I saw after the Crosstown shootout was the pictures and the videos of you at Dana Gardens. How was the reception there after the big win over UC on Friday night?
Yeah, I've never been in Dana Gardens. And so I was a little apprehensive at first to do it because our student section, they seemed to be having a very good time before the game. Sure. There was a lot of energy in there, and so I'm sitting there going, all right, do I do this? One of my assistants, Peyton, talked me into it and said, you got to do it. So as we were kind of walking over there, because there wasn't parking out front. I mean, it was just like so many students building up, walking in there. So I'm glad I did it. So much of our crowd is about the student section. So it was good to take care of them. But I was in there very, very briefly and got out of there as quickly as possible.
Sure. Hopefully they didn't run up the tab too much there.
It wasn't too bad.
Okay. I know one thing that you mentioned was how important the student section is. Cintas Center is one of the toughest places to play in the country. The Crosstown shootout is one of the best rivalries in this country. I know, obviously, you've been around college basketball for a long time, so you knew that. How much did the Crosstown shootout live up to the billing in your mind of how great this rivalry is?
Well, I tell you what, it was a great game on both sides. It was close a lot of the way. We built the lead. They came back. They took a lead with whatever that was, 2.5, 3 minutes. And then Philip Borovichnin knocks down a big shot. But there was playmaking on both sides. So that's what you always want. I mean, you want, what truly makes a good rivalry is when both teams are good, right? So both teams were certainly playing at a high level, making shots, defending, rebounding, doing all those things. But the environment was as good as I have seen. I think it's a true bragging rights rivalry. It clearly matters to both fan bases. And I think when you have, you're 3 miles apart, you got friends who are UC fans, you got friends who are Xavier fans, you can tell it really means a lot to both fan bases to be able to brag for a year that we won or they won. So fortunate to kick off my first time with a win, but it was a pretty special environment.
Yeah, it is about bragging rights, and if there's one dude that can brag the most, it's Trey Carroll. Talk about his performance against UC on Friday.
Yeah, I mean he's been consistently probably our best player from just start to finish of the year. I mean, you've had guys like Jovan Milicevic who's jumped onto the scene and done a lot of good things. But I think Trey has been pretty reliable. But just the uniqueness of the way that he scored. And he does that. He does that in practice. He's making, left-hand, right-hand jump hooks from 8 feet away that are just really, really hard. But we put him in what we call a Barkley situation where it's kind of give him the ball out on the perimeter and dribble down and see the way they're going to guard you. And he really was impressive there. And that's what makes college basketball so special is although guys are transferring and doing all this, you're still playing with that emotion and that energy that still hasn't gone away, which is nice to see.
Yeah, he certainly played with a lot of emotion, a lot of energy, and you saw it in the post-game, all the interviews that he did. And for a lot of people in this city, that was the first time, kind of getting to know Trey, and he seems to have an incredibly infectious personality. What was your first impression when you met him and he was coming to Xavier? What was your first impression of Trey?
Obviously the hair. I mean, you're like, wow, what a amazing full head of hair there. But then the more you got to know him, great kid. Came with his mom. Came with his wife. You know, he's not a kid. He's a grown married man.
Sure.
Came with his grandparents. You know, so kind of cool. Like, this isn't to knock Florida by any means, but he's from there. Goes to FAU. Obviously, they have a great run, but you know, it's not like they don't have the fan support that a Xavier has. So, like, I don't think Trey wanted to leave FAU. I really don't. He was pretty loyal to them, but it just, for whatever reason, it was time to move on. But to have him experience like a true basketball experience, you know, to finish off his career has been great. So he's a gamer too. You know, I mean, he practices well, but when the lights come on, he does a lot of impressive things for sure.
No doubt about it. Coach, following the Santa Clara loss and the loss to Iowa, this team has really stepped up to a whole different level of play. Where have you seen the biggest improvements from the team?
You know, the Santa Clara game, like, I'm not surprised that we lost. Like, Santa Clara is a really good team. They're old. They've got guys back. Coach Sendak does a great job. So I scheduled that game, although it was like a bye game. I'm like, no, this is a quality game that we could absolutely, if we win it, could be like a quad 2. If we lose, I don't think it's necessarily going to kill us. But it was like an alarming game all around. And we had to make some changes, whether it was lineup, whether it was, just some adjustments defensively to how we're doing things. And, you know, we changed up the lineup. We put Jovan at the 5. Mm-hmm. And although we went to Iowa and didn't win, like, I think we saw some things in there of like, okay, we're putting the defense in a bind, with how we're going 5 out and doing those things. So you've seen the number of assists really go up, the number of turnovers really go down. And that's just what happens when you play 5 skilled guys together. So the response going into Charleston, I thought, was phenomenal. Came back, almost won the Georgia game, had that, Georgia's very, very talented. The next day we came back and practiced our butts off. The day of the West Virginia game, we did an early shoot around, and it was like a full-on practice. So I saw the light kind of go on and the confidence build with that lineup and everybody kind of filling into their roles, and it's been pretty cool to see.
One thing you mentioned is the turnovers have gone down since you've gone to kind of this new style. UC, they're one of the best teams in the country at creating turnovers. You guys didn't turn the ball over a lot. How has your team been able to really take care of the basketball?
People have asked me that a lot, as if like I'm doing something special in coaching, and
you are.
I'm not. I think it's playing 5 skilled guys who are enjoying the way that they're playing together. Like we haven't practiced. Sometimes we look like the Golden State Warriors, the way everybody's sharing it, spraying it. Sometimes like, hey, somebody's got to shoot the ball, man. Like, but. Yeah, I mean, that's our only chance. Like, we're not going to out-athlete you by any means, but if we have a chance to win any games, we kind of almost have to out-fundamental you. Playing off of 2 feet is something we work on a lot. Trey was terrific in the game. Malik had a great kick out off of 2 to get Jovan a 3. So I just think when your spacing is good and you've got guys that are able to make shots, everybody's willing to share the ball.
We've talked Trey. Is there anyone else on the team that you've seen? Is there anyone that you can really highlight as this guy has really stepped it up? This guy has really come into his own as a player and has really helped the team recently.
Filip Borovicin, by far. I think he has been extremely consistent, knocked down a huge 3. I know Trey was the storyline of that game, but right. I mean, Filip, not blinking. And sometimes it happens where team hits a big shot and everybody just freezes and they almost want you to call a timeout as a coach. Like, I really don't want to do that. I think your best chance to get an easy look is to just go, and not let the defense set up. And Filip comes down and he had been struggling with his shot a little bit. I think he's only made about 6 7 threes or something like that on the year. Not to do the 6-7 thing because I got young kids and I've moved on from that.
Right.
But I think defensively, his versatility. I mean, he is a 6'8" guard, and he had a game. He had 15 rebounds. So I think he's kind of been the unsung hero on the team.
You play Missouri State tomorrow, then you start Big East games next week. When you look at the team and you get ready for conference play, what are you guys going to have to do to have a successful season in conference?
Again, I mean, I think it's, we're not going to go into a lot of these venues and be like, okay, we can block shots. We're going to out rebound you. Like, we're just not that type of team right now.
Right.
Our discipline, I think, to the fundamentals has got to be huge. Like, I'm not surprised that UC out rebounded us. Like, they were jumping over us. But our blockouts have got to be better. Our spacing has got to be great. Our ability to get into the paint and make the right decisions. I was really proud of the fact because UC was staying home on all of our shooters. When we played West Virginia, we would get into the paint and they would really collapse and we were kicking it out, getting really good looks. UC didn't do that, and we were still able to score a lot of 2-point buckets. Still got to get better defensively. I think it's getting better, but in order to go win on the road, like, we got to get some stops and then finish those possessions with some rebounds. But we'll have a chance if we continue to share the ball and not turn it over like we've been doing.
If I would have told you before that Crosstown shootout game that you would go 6 for 28 from 3, shoot 50% from the line, give up 15 offensive rebounds, what would your opinion have been on how that game would have went?
Well, I mean, I think UC is really, really talented. I think West does a really good job with them. But I would have probably been surprised if we would have won the game like that. But we have been harping on it, and we've been working a lot on it in practice of, like, yes, when you play 5 guys who can shoot the 3, like, that's a fun way to coach. It really is. But you cannot rely on it and be consumed with it because teams are going to take it away. And now what do you do? And guys did a really, really good job of kind of committing to the offensive game plan. Teams are going to play a variety of ways. They went zone versus us. And it surprised us a little bit early. And then we hit the ball, threw it in the middle of the zone. And then we hit the short corner and had a couple finishes there. So we adjusted well to that as well.
All right. I can't let you go without asking about your dad. You play him twice this year. You've coached against him, obviously, before, but never in conference games, never on this high of a scale. What's that going to be like again when you play him next month?
Yeah, it's definitely weird. I tell the story that we have a Big East head coaches group chat that was started by Dan Leibowitz, who works for the Big East. And I remember he sent out a text about, I don't know, a meeting or a Zoom call that we were going to do. And I saw, like, Shaka Smart give the thumbs up. Greg McDermott was like, okay. Ed Cooley was, gave the thumbs up. And all of a sudden I see Dad, like, okay. And I'm like, oh man, this is almost like, this doesn't feel right. It's like he's breaking up a party or something. But it'll be I mean, the biggest thing is, like, they're really, really good and they're really talented. They've lost some close games. So for one, like, whenever you play my dad, like, you become a better coach because it's really not about an underneath out of bounds play. It's about, like, you better be a warrior out there or you're going to get embarrassed. I mean, St. John's did it to Xavier last year in this building, just manhandled them on the glass. So, we're preparing for Missouri State, but we also know, like, the Big East is around the corner. And if you do not compete, you will get embarrassed. And certainly when you play St. John's, that's the greatest compliment. My dad's been a head coach for, 40, 50 years. And effort has never, ever been an issue with them.
Yeah. You can be honest with me. If I would have asked you, you could win the shootout or you can beat your dad this year, which one would you have preferred?
I think the shootout means a lot more to our fans. Okay. The shootout is a hard game because as a coach, you are programmed to not make one game bigger than another. Mm-hmm. But the fan base and the media really ramped the thing up. And so it's a victory, for me, building this program. And we started from scratch. People forget one of our best players got hurt, hasn't even played yet.
Right.
So to be able to win the shootout was great. But certainly bragging rights internally in my family, that would be cool too. But we know St. John's is a championship team, and that'll be really, really a huge challenge as well.
Coach, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you hopping on. Good luck tomorrow against Missouri State.
All right. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yep. Coach Richard Pitino from the Xavier Musketeers. 6 days removed from beating the Cincinnati Bearcats in the Crosstown shootout. Man, well, what a great interview, because he was he's flying. I thought I was going to get him. Because I thought he was going to say his dad. Not that I was trying to get anyone. And obviously, beating St. John's once or twice is better on the old resume than beating Cincinnati. But as he has grown to understand, as we know here in Cincinnati, there's quite nothing like the Crosstown shootout. Stone, you were worried about that one for a second there. Things weren't going right, but we got the ship.
That's poise from the boys right there. Shout out Casey McCoster. Shout out you. Shout out me too. But that was a heck of an interview. That was awesome. I didn't not that I didn't have high hopes for it. I did, but he was unbelievable. So looking forward to getting that out on YouTube certainly as well.
He was unbelievable. I'm going to ask you to raise that camera.
Okay, you're going to stand. Yeah.
We can do it live. For medical reasons, I cannot sit down currently right now. That was a little tough, but yeah, there was a lot of great things that I thought Coach Patino said. It's one thing that I thought was funny was I asked him about how they've been taking care of the ball, not turning over the ball this season, and he's like, people have been asking me like I have some secret routine or some secret answers on how we're not able to turn the ball over. And quite honestly, it's just they put the ball in the hands of really good ball handlers. And a team that might not have the same talent level that they've had over the past few years. They made the tournament, won a tournament game last year, went to the Sweet 16 a few years ago. But obviously Xavier here in this town, we understand how good of a program that can be. But you've got to understand your team. And if you talk to coaches, regardless of the sport, football, basketball, sometimes coaches, they get so ingrained in this is our team, this is how I run our team, this is how we're going to play. And then there's some coaches, oftentimes the more successful ones, that kind of coach on the fly and look at the talents of your team and go, hey, this is what we do very well. And that's kind of the smaller ball that Xavier has taken to over the last few weeks, and it's paid off for them. In the Big East this year, as they start playing next Wednesday against Creighton, obviously they got a big game game tomorrow in the Cintas Center against Missouri State. When you get into the Big East, for years it's been the Big 12 has taken over. The SEC's been great for the past few years, but the Big East is still the big basketball conference just because that's what all these schools do well. And this year, outside of UConn and St. John's, these top teams, the middle pack, the lower pack of the Big East, it is kind of open for the taking. And the way that Xavier's been playing over the past few years or last few weeks, I don't think it surprised any if you said this team is kind of going to be floating in the middle or near the top or feisty in some of these Big East games. So thank you so much for Richard Pitino hopping on here to Off the Bench. We appreciate it so much. Stone's going to be interviewing Travis Steele later on, as that's going to be on his show starting at 11 o'clock. Travis Steele and the undefeated Miami Redhawks. I believe they're 9-0, had a big win last night, one of the 8 remaining undefeated teams in the country, even getting some top 25 votes. So that's going to be a great interview all the same. All right, Stone. I mentioned this before. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I mentioned it off screen. A lot has been made on Twitter. The reporters, it's even making national news about Joe Burrow's presser yesterday. And the comments that he made saying he's just trying to find ways to be happy or have fun playing football. I got the push notification, didn't see the video. Dan Orlovsky saying, this is the beginning of the end. I see all these fans going, crying, hey, this he wants out, he's done, he's everything like this. I'm going to be completely transparent. I'm going to be completely honest to you guys, to Stone, as I start this conversation. I watched that whole presser. And I oftentimes am the fan or the guy that wants to come in here on off the bench and just a knee-jerk reaction to every single thing that happens here in Cincinnati. They lose the game, I want Zach Taylor fired. They win a game, he should be here. Give him an extension. They beat the Chiefs. They're winning the Super Bowl. They lose to the Jets. I want the whole thing torn down to its studs. I'm that kind of a guy. I'm that kind of a fan. I'm that kind of a host here on Off the Bench. But I'll be completely transparent. I watched these videos, watched the entire clip, and I couldn't grasp a take. I couldn't get myself to get fired up to say, oh, yeah, Joe Burrow, he's out, man. He's so far down. Because, quite honestly, as great as a football player, Joe has been a little weird throughout his entire career, right? He's been short. He's been quiet. He's been, at pressers throughout his entire career. So it's hard for me to watch that and go, oh, he's out. He's done. Oh, it's not good. And this is the first time in Joe Burrow's career. If you ask me, Reed, we need a take out of you. Reed, we need you to say something about Joe Burrow's comments yesterday. One is that I'm not reading into it as far as everyone else is. I'm just not. I think he's clearly upset with the turn that the season has had. I don't think that it's irreparable damage to the relationship between Cincinnati and the Bengals and Joe and everyone. I don't think it's anything like that. I don't think he's looking for the exit. But I also understand that through his since 2019, since his first year at LSU, they win the national championship in year 2, dominate, one of the best seasons ever. He comes to Cincinnati. He's the savior. In his first full healthy, they go to the Super Bowl, second full healthy year. They go to the AFC Championship. Last year, doing heroic stuff. He's always had this mentality that he can come on the horse and save the day. And this team, as we know, that really was never going to happen. They were 3-8 when he took over. They had to win out with a team that just went 1-7 over the last, or 1-8 over the last 9 weeks. So I think he's just coming down from this opinion of his that he was going to come in, save the day. Stone, I'm trying to open up this conversation. I don't know if you had any dead giveaways from this presser.
Yeah, I think immediately the first take is, all right, not great. But I'm with you. I think some people are overreacting a little bit, but, that's Twitter. That's the nature of the app. That's what people do. But the way I kind of described it to you off the air is, this organization is hanging on by a thread, and a lot of people would argue they're not even hanging on. And the only thing keeping this operation together is Joe Burrow. So when you hear comments like that, it is very concerning because your mind immediately goes to, oh, what if he doesn't want to be here? What if Joe Burrow wants out? Because you know that if Joe Burrow is not a Cincinnati Bengal, if you couldn't win with Joe Burrow, you will never win as an organization. So I understand why people are, upset, freaking out, concerned a little bit about his comments. But I think my take on this whole thing is that Joe Burrow, the fun that he finds in playing football, yeah, he's played the game his whole life. I'm sure he loves the game, but it is a job now, right? It's his profession. That's what he does. But I think his true joy that he finds in the game is going on playoff runs and thinking about the postseason and trying to win a Super Bowl. And the reality of the situation the past 3 years, it has been so far from that. And I think that's kind of why you see the mood of Joe Burrow. And, I think when he came back, he's doing everything in his power to come back. In his mind, he's thinking, I'm going to come back, we're going to run the table and make the playoffs. The rest of us knew that probably wasn't going to happen, so we had checked out on the season a lot earlier than that. But Joe Burrow, I think, is having the same reaction we all did. His was just postponed because now is when he's realizing, oh, yeah, we're going to be at home again for the third year in a row.
So are you taking this into anything deeper than he's just going through a bad week, right? Like he's finally just coming down from the high of coming back early. This dude's Superman. This dude can do no wrong. This dude can save a franchise, as he's almost done multiple times here in Cincinnati. He can do all this. He goes on Thanksgiving in front of a national audience and dismantles the Baltimore Ravens, a conference rival, division rival. And do you think it's just him coming down from, all right, I really never could save this season.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. Again, like I said, the rest of us, we realized that wasn't going to happen a long time ago. But for him, and the psycho competitor that he is, he didn't really have that realization until now. And look, he'll be back next year for sure. But I think, you don't want to overreact. That's the right thing to do. I don't think you should overreact. But I do think we need to start having the conversation of, well, what if they miss the playoffs in 26? Oh, what if they miss in 27? And then he's got this opt-out in his contract. Like, could we only see Joe Burrow for 2 more years? I think if you miss the playoffs the next 2 years, what shows you that this team is going to make the playoffs, right? They've had, a healthy Joe Burrow last year, healthy Jamar Chase, healthy T. Higgins. It wasn't good enough, right? You're getting Joe Burrow ball out here at the end, but you couldn't win enough games when he wasn't here to get in. So, I mean, if you continue to miss the playoffs, it could get dire.
Yeah, his contract's up in 2027, correct? Or
I believe there is an opt-out in 27. It goes longer than that, but I believe he can get out of it.
We won't speculate into that. I will tell you that openly that if he has an opt-out at the end of that contract, the only world in which he doesn't opt out of that is if he's not playing well. Because if he's playing well, he obviously the market's going to reset. He's going to want more money. If he wants out, he's going to want to opt out of that and seek free agency. All those things will happen when you get to that opt-out. There's really not a scenario in which he takes that in. And you could say it's $55 million. Why wouldn't you take that? Well, my inclination is I don't know who's up for an extension in the quarterback rooms, but there will, as we've seen, just like the housing market's like every single month or every single year, there's a new record for who is the highest paid quarterback. And that's just what it is until someone puts their foot down. I'll say this about Joe. One thing I've always known about sports is that winning cures all. And when we drafted Joe Burrow all the way back in 2020, there was a sentiment because of the year that he had in LSU when he was the surefire #1 overall pick that he should turn down Cincinnati, that he should do the Eli Manning, do the John Elway, and not come to Cincinnati, which at the time we all knew that was kind of ridiculous because we're not a great franchise. Cincinnati Bengals aren't. We're not. We're not. Just aren't. We're not the Browns. We're not the Jets. We're not the Jets. We're not those franchises. We've had success here in town. In fact, throughout most of my life, they've been at least competitive, oftentimes good. So that was ridiculous. But since that was the opening salvo, every step of turbulence along the way, every road bump, every stop, there has been someone saying, we are going to ruin Joe Burrow. And even if he didn't believe it at the beginning, and even if he doesn't believe it right now, you can only hear something so many times before it creeps into your subconscious. And he has been hurt multiple times. He said it so himself yesterday in the presser. When you've been through what I've been through, all the injuries, it starts to weigh heavy on you. It does. It doesn't matter if you're getting paid $55 million to do the job or not. This game that we all wish we could play, all wish we can be making $55 million in play. We all, because it's a game. It's the thing that a lot of us have looked for to do since we've been 18 and graduated high school. We want to play sports competitively again. And he's getting paid $55 million. It doesn't matter the job, the profession. You can only take so much of people going, the Bengals are ruining Joe Burrow. The Bengals are going to waste Joe Burrow's prime. The Bengals are going to waste Joe Burrow's career. Before, even if he doesn't believe it, even if Zach Taylor and Mike Brown and Katie Blackburn and everyone that could say the right things in Joe Burrow's ears, and he loves it here in Cincinnati, which I don't know if that's the case. He seems like a recluse. He seems very pushed or standoffish. He seems stoic. You can only hear that so many times before it starts to creep in and be like, am I being wasted here in Cincinnati? Because he obviously he has an immense confidence in who he is as a player and a great understanding of who he is as a player, to where he actually believed that he could take a 3-8 Bengals team to the postseason and win out. And he's coming down from that now. Is it the beginning of the end? I'd argue maybe the beginning of the end was the Miles Murphy pick. or the letting go of Jesse Bates, or insert whatever bad step the Bengals have made over the past few years, and they've made a lot of them. It's really hard in the NFL to compete year in and year out. It's why I've been made fun of for how much I'm enamored by what the Chiefs have been able to do over the past 7 years. They might not make the postseason, but going to 7, whatever it is, consecutive AFC championships, 6 consecutive, or 5 out of 7 Super Bowls. It's incredible. Even the Mike Tomlin thing, that's become a bit. Oh, yeah, you have a winning record every year, but you get blown out, and that's all true. And we can make fun of him for getting blown out in the postseason every year. But having a winning record year in and year out in this league is really tough. It's really tough. And the Bengals caught lightning in a bottle a few years ago. It felt like this was going to be the new normal for us here in town. It felt like every single year we were going to be competing with the big dogs, not just in the AFC North, but in the entire American Football Conference, the AFC. Felt like they were genuinely going to be in the AFC Championship more often than they are not. And we haven't seen them sniff the playoffs since. Missed out by a game last year, missed out by a game the year before. They're going to miss out by a bunch this year. And if Joe is as competitive as he seems, you cannot blame him for when his contract's done. He's not going to pull a Carson Palmer. I'll put that to bed. I will be incredibly, incredibly surprised if he pulls a Carson Palmer and says, I'm no longer playing for you guys. I do not want to play here anymore. That's not going to happen. What might happen is we get to that opt-out, if there is one. He gets the end of the contract, and he's going to seek somewhere else. Or even a year before, he says, I'm going to play out this contract here in town, just giving you a no, then I'm going to open myself up to free agency. So if you want to get rid of me now, this will be a good chance to at least recoup. That might happen, but he's not going to stand on the sideline and say, I'm not playing for you anymore. So all the fans that are, this is the end of it all. Pump the brakes. Joe Burrow is not that kind of a player. Joe Burrow is not that kind of a person, a professional. He will play here in Cincinnati. Now, are we now flipped over the sand dial, or whatever you call those things that have the sand? Are we flipping that over and the sand's starting to trickle down and we're running out of time? No doubt about it, on how to get this right. Because in the current trajectory, I don't know if we're going to be getting another extension with Joe. So they've got a few years to at least make this team look like a championship contender. And it's going to be interesting. And Stone, can you see Joe Burrow pulling a Carson Palmer and saying, I'm not going to play unless you get rid of me?
Not pulling a Carson Palmer, but when there is the opt-out, I could see him saying, you know what, I'm ready to go somewhere else, which he would be allowed to do. But, like, as far as this year or next year saying he doesn't want to play, I would be shocked if we saw that. And also, I think another element to this is, you know, a lot of people's minds go towards him wanting to play elsewhere, which very well could be a possibility. But also, what if he just doesn't want to play? You know, I think a lot of people made the comparisons to Andrew Luck, and a lot of us kind of laughed at that. And we're like, Joe Burrow, he's a crazy competitor. He's not going to just not play. But he's questioned his football mortality in the past, and you've kind of heard the way he's talked about it. Basically like, I'm trying to find the fun again in this game. He's made, you know, we could make a heck of a lot more money, but let's be real here. He's good for life, and I'm sure his family is there as well. So I think that's kind of another dynamic to it. Not anticipating that's going to be the case, but I think that's something worth discussing.
It's funny. I caught up on the chat here. Someone put in there, making fun of me, said, Reed knows what Burrow is thinking. Wow. That's what everyone's doing in this town today, guys. I mean, we're all looking into a presser, and we're reading too far into it and interpreting it to what we think is going on there. Even before Joe came back, he looked like a sad puppy. Even before he was playing there, he just every time they'd show the camera when they'd be at a home game, and you're like, oh, man, he doesn't look to be enjoying his life all that much right now. But I think that is just kind of who he is as a person. The Bengals will play the Baltimore Ravens this week. There is still a little bit of glimmer. It is, I mean, so faint, like a star millions of light years away, billions of light years away, just a little glimmer in the sky that the Bengals can still make this happen. We know it's not. Even Joe Burrow says we know it's not happening. It requires them to win out, have the Steelers lose 3 games, and have the Ravens lose another one on top of losing this Sunday. So it's not happening. But can this team continue to improve defensively? I know they just had a terrible game against the Bills, and that's been kind of the hallmark for the last 3 years. But to be honest, the only things that are of the utmost importance for the Bengals going on for the rest of this year, because they're clearly not going to worry about getting in or quote-unquote tanking to get a better draft pick, so that's not happening. So when it comes to this Ravens game this Sunday, you should want to take care of your own division. Finishing 5-1 in the season will maybe be a gut punch through it all when you look up at their full record and they're 7-10 or whatever it may be. But sweeping the Ravens should never not feel good as a fan. And the only things that the Bengals can look forward to for the rest of this year is of the utmost importance is making sure that Joe Burrow, number 9, does not get hurt. Making sure that we're not running those plays that he's holding onto the ball for 7 seconds. I don't want to see that. I know that's his playmaking ability, but I cannot see Joe Burrow get hurt now. And number 2 is figuring out, if you can, to the best of your ability, who the hell is coming back on this defensive side. Because right now it seems like a complete overhaul. Because right now I'm not sure, outside of Juan Drago Turner, there is a single soul on this defense that isn't on the chopping block in some capacity. You can say, oh, we're not going to replace 10 guys, because they're not. We know that. But there is one guy and one guy only when you look at this defense that you can go, I want him on the defense next year. Anybody else better be working hard these next few weeks. Better be showing Al Golden, Duke Tobin, Zach Taylor something. Because there is going to be just massive overhaul. And if there isn't, what are we doing here in town? What are we doing? Lane Jordan with a $5 super chat. If we finish 2-2 to end the season, any big changes made at the end of the year? I was fully convinced, following the loss to the Bears right before the trade deadline, that the Bengals were going to fire Zach Taylor. I fully convinced myself. Obviously, that was incredibly dumb. If you had me put a percentage, and I'll ask Stone to do the same, if you had me put a percentage on the possibility of a new head football coach here for the Cincinnati Bengals going into next year, I'll put it at 1-5, which is probably way higher than some of yours and maybe way lower than some of yours. But I'll say about a 20%. Stone, you got a percentage off the top of your head?
Yep, think that's perfectly accurate. I would compare it to the Reds' chances of getting Schwarber last week, about 20%.
As for, I can't even, when you're talking significant changes, they're not going to make a change from Al Golden. They did that. The Bengals are, I truly believe they're lazy in how they go about getting coaches, and you're not going to fire a defensive coordinator in back-to-back years. You've already used that Uno reverse card. Can't play it again. So then the next question is, okay, what about what about Duke Tobin? Will there be a change made? And we did this on the mailbag yesterday. Was asked if you had a wish list for the Bengals. You can get one thing. You get one thing from Santa. What would it be? My one thing from Santa, my one thing that I want the Cincinnati Bengals to do is hire a general manager. I know we have the de facto GM, Duke Tobin. He can even stay. I want them to hire somebody and just appease me in some regard and just, hey, we got a GM. He could have less power than Duke Tobin and nothing really changes. But a different voice in that clubhouse, in the front office, I think would go a long way. So if you want a percentage on the chances if they finish 2-2, that would put them at 6-11 to round out the year. I have it about 20% of Zach Taylor's going to be gone. And the other 20, and then for Duke Tobin, the other major change that would happen, I cannot even begin to give a percentage chance. It seems closer to 0 than 20, but I could see them finally giving in to kind of what this fan base was. Because whether organizations want to admit this or not, what we say as fans, local media, or whatever, it does weigh. It does have some weight. Does it have weight in when Reds fans are saying, sell the team, Bob? No, it's not that. Sell the team, Mike Brown? No, not that. But when you're constantly calling for major changes, eventually there will be some give there. So maybe there will be some major change. And I'll be honest, if they finish 6-11 and we don't see at least some drastic altering change to the way that they evaluate talent or the way that they go about the draft, or either extenuating or extending all the people in their scouting department, whatever it is, I need to see something from them. I need to see something. Or else, what are we doing here? We're just going to run it back? No. I ain't doing that. All right, here in the final 13 minutes of the show or so. Major news happened yesterday. The University of Michigan had fired their head coach, Coach Moore, for just cause. I'm not going to speculate into everything that happened yesterday about infidelity, the arrest. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I want to kind of talk about the coaching job itself, because I think that even the hardest Michigan fans would admit that Chiron Moore wasn't probably it. He wasn't trending in the right direction, and they would have liked to seen someone else step in. He might have gotten another year, and if he would have been 9-3 again, he would have been shown the door. So the question is okay, they're behind the 8 ball here. They're 9-3. All the big coaching candidates are presumed off the board. Where does Michigan go from here? Stone, I'll open it up. I'll start with you, and I'll throw it to you, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. Is there any names when you think of Michigan and who they can pull in? And this is a bizarre story that I don't feel confident commenting on, so we're not going to. But when it comes to the head coaching job, is there any names that kind of fly out? I've got one that has been not speculated, but been thrown out that I think could be a good fit. I'll let you go first, though. Is there any names that pop out into your mind?
Well, I think Michigan's cooked, first off, at least for the next year. Signing day, of course, is a thing of the past right now. Look, they didn't want to have to make this move now. If they wanted to fire him without the cause, they would have done it before signing day, and they would have done it right when everyone else was kind of moving on from their coaches there as well, so they could really have a full coaching search. So they're in a world of trouble. Biff Poggi is their interim guy. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that they kind of extend that interim tag through the 2026 year.
Oh, wow.
And let him stick around for a year and then try to have a coaching search after that. There's a couple of names that come to mind. People keep saying Kalen DeBoer, right? That whole thing about Penn State, and he was one of the favorites to go to Penn State. That's ridiculous. Kalen DeBoer's not leaving Alabama for Michigan, right? You have to understand that Michigan, people view it as a big-time job, and it is, but they're a mess right now. Look at all the suspensions and scandals. There was going to be more suspensions and scandals before this situation with Chiron Moore even happens. I wouldn't want to walk in there and leave Alabama for that. So I think Kalen DeBoer's out of the question. People have thrown around Brian Kelly's name, which would be hilarious if Michigan did that. I would not expect them to make a decision like that and go with Brian Kelly, because clearly that did not work at LSU. I think Jed Fish, to me, is a name to monitor. He's got some ties to Michigan, has done a nice job at Washington. They had a solid year, so I think if Michigan could get Jed Fish, they would be happy about it. But that would probably be my top target here at this point. People say Jesse Minter, would he go back to college? I do think Michigan's a job that, some NFL guys would go back to college for. Obviously, it was Harbaugh's DC there before being Harbaugh's DC in LA, so that's another name to monitor. But Michigan's in deep trouble.
Mount St. Joe Lion grad Jesse Minter would certainly take the job if they offered it to him. I think that would be ill-advised. So you mentioned Kalen DeBoer. And that wasn't the name that I was going to bring up. But I do think it's interesting because in the world of NIL and the reporting of the money that can be spent out and stuff like this, it seems to be that Michigan has a little more buying power than Alabama. At least that's just the reporting that comes out more often than not. Obviously, Alabama is the top program in the land. It's them at Ohio State and has been that way for 20 years now. So it'd be interesting to see if DeBoer, hightails it up there. I don't think that's going to happen. Let me take you down this scenario. Here in the AFC North, there has been a lot to talk about the head coaches. I think every single coach for every team in the AFC North has had rumors swirl that it's probably the last year for it. Mike Tomlin, Kevin Stefanski, Zach Taylor, and John Harbaugh. So do you think if the Ravens part ways with John Harbaugh, one, he's shaking his head over there. One, do you think that that's even a remote possibility? And two, do you think that would be someone that they'd go after?
I do think it's a remote possibility. If I'm Michigan, absolutely I would go after him. But if Harbaugh's available, the Titans are going to be calling. Everybody in the NFL is going to be calling. And after doing the NFL thing for so long, do you want to go to college where you have to deal with NIL and the portal? Absolutely not. So I get where you're going. It'd be fun. Kind of like the Phillip Rivers story, how fun that is talking about. It'd be fun talking about Jim Harbaugh's brother going to take his old job at Michigan, but no way in heck would John Harbaugh.
Where would he make more money? Because if he gets fired, the options would be like the Titans. The Titans aren't going to pony up $15 million with a $100 million buyout or whatever. It'd be Michigan would do that. So if it's a capacity of, oh, you're fired from Baltimore. Yeah, you're right. I've been doing professional football. I've never been a head college coach. It's a completely different world, but that's also intriguing to somebody, especially someone that's won a Super Bowl and has been at the heights of the NFL to where they go, hey, this is new territory for me. This is something new I can accomplish. Obviously, I've got good ties there. My brother did a fantastic job there. I would be regarded very high, and I'd get a heck of a payday to where even if the Titans or whoever, if John Harbaugh goes, maybe they do pony up $15 million, but it's a 3-year deal. $45 million. You go to Michigan, you're getting a $90, $100 million buyout. I'm just saying, money talks. And if John Harbaugh gets fired, if John Harbaugh gets fired and Michigan has not sorted a name yet, that will be the biggest story in sports. In college football, is John Harbaugh going to Michigan? Is John Harbaugh going to Michigan? That will happen. Now it's a month away. Is Michigan going to sit on their hands for a month? I don't know. Probably not. But just something to throw out there. I know like Jeff Hafley's name's been thrown around. If I was Jeff Hafley, if I'm Michigan, why would I want a Hafley? He's obviously a pretty good DC, but I don't know. It's beside the point. Jesse Minter, I think, would be a bad hire. The Brian Kelly stuff, I think Brian Kelly's done because as we've learned throughout the history of humanity, you can be a jerk. I don't even know if I'm allowed saying the D word, a D-I-C-K. You can be a douche as long as you're winning. But the second that those wins stop coming, the second that there is something bad on the backside, they drop you like a bad habit. They drop you immediately. And when you burn bridges, it's hard to get back across the river. And Brian Kelly, from every story that's ever surfaced, and I just think he's got too much bad PR. So the Brian Kelly stuff, Michigan would have to be incredibly desperate to go the Brian Kelly route. Like, there are so many better routes. It's going to be interesting to see where Michigan goes, and also as a human interest piece, it's interesting to see what unfolds with this story that, once again, I'm not going to comment on or talk about because I don't think all the details are out. So we will continue to see what happens like that. I'm just saying, if Baltimore fires John Harbaugh and Michigan hasn't hired a coach yet, that will be a major story. And Stone can shake his head all he wants because it's still because he's probably right. It's not going to happen, but
be good for us. Fun to talk about.
It would be fun to talk about. Do you at least agree with that? That if he gets fired and Michigan still is without a head coach, that would be?
Oh yeah, that'd be a huge story.
That would be the huge. That'd be outside of the games being played in the NFL postseason and the college football playoff, which would be nearing its end. It'd be the biggest story in town. And it lines up. There's a lot of things lining up. Remember a few years ago when Carson Palmer, great guy that Carson Palmer is, Carson Palmer randomly on, was it the Dan Patrick show, just out of nowhere said before USC got Lincoln Riley that they were looking at Mike Tomlin. just he's like, yeah, we're looking at Mike Tomlin. Then Mike Tomlin took to the press conference that day, and he's like, what the hell are you talking about? No, you're not. No, I'm not going to college. I know he's a name that sometimes gets thrown around. Mike Tomlin ain't going anywhere in college. He ain't nearing it because he said it multiple times. It is. I'm just telling you, a lot of money in college, a lot more money than even in the pros. It used to not be that way, but as I cannot sit down once again, it's been a tough day. Medical reasons won't let me sit down. Stone, I want to thank you so much for setting up as producer extraordinaire, setting up that interview with Richard Pitino, and I know you were very excited that you got that one off the ground.
Yes, very. It was. We won't get into the weeds here, but yeah, we won't get into the weeds. But basically, we kept the computer on overnight to make sure that the link was still good, and then I guess that messed with our sound system a little bit. But we're here, and we got it on. Good thing we went live a few minutes early, Reed, because it ended up working out perfectly.
It was almost a perfect game. Just with it was a no-hitter. It was a no-hitter. We just walked the first three batters.
Yeah.
Then struck out the side, and it ended up working out. But man, I'll tell you this, as we wind the show, it's going to be interesting if the Bengals lose again to see what kind of comments Joe Burrow comes out with, because he's pretty clearly over it. We'll just see. It's a wait and see. They play this Sunday. We'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow as we wind out the final few minutes here on the show. Xavier plays Missouri State. Stone, I don't know if you had any parting thoughts about the Michigan hire or anything like that.
No, I just think, clearly to me, if you just want to take all the other nonsense, put that to the side for a little bit and just talk football for a second, I think Michigan probably regret the hire, just promoting him from Harbaugh's staff. Obviously,
when was the last time that worked? Ryan Day? Ryan Day is the only time that I can really think that worked.
Yeah. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of.
It was a different time, too. Right. It wasn't the NIL.
Yeah. And honestly, I think people would have probably been talking about it earlier than this year had they not beat Michigan or beat Ohio State last year. Remember, it was an ugly game. They couldn't even throw the ball down the field, right? And they just got into an ugly game and squeaked out a 3-point win against Ohio State last year. I think people would have been having more conversations about, okay, this guy he might not be the right guy for the job. And we're not far removed from a national title at Michigan. The standard there, 9-3 is not getting it done at Michigan. We saw Brian Kelly win a bunch of games at LSU, and it wasn't clearly even close to enough. So the way it went down is a nightmare for the university and the athletic department and just the Michigan brand, right? But I think moving off of him and going into a different direction isn't the worst thing for Michigan. But obviously the way it went down is embarrassing.
Well, I think if they were the number 3 team in the country and 12-1 and lost in the Big Ten championship and had a great year last year, I'm not saying this story would be swept under the rug, but it certainly wouldn't have been just, Michigan's cutting ties. We fired for just cause. Like, if this dude had been winning at a very high level, as sad as that is to say, this whole thing, like I said, it would not be swept on the rug, but it would be just maybe a blemish if he was churning out championship caliber teams. Where does Michigan rank in college, as someone who watches far more college football? It feels like Michigan is outside of that top tier of LSU, Alabama, Ohio State. It feels like they're just mixed in that second group of tiers. Is that off? Texas is a better job, but
yeah, I think most people would say it's definitely a top 8 job in the country. I think you could make the argument it's a top 5 job. I personally wouldn't, just because of all the controversy surrounding their program. Like, I'm not an Ohio State fan, but Michigan, they're a bunch of cheaters, right? Chiron Moore was suspended this year. Right? It's true. And he was going to be facing suspensions probably next year as well. And they have all kinds of violations and the Connor Stallion stuff. And now this. The list kind of just goes on and on for them. So all those, issues off the playing surface and just scandals that they're involved in, I think that makes it not as glamorous of a job as maybe it was when Harbaugh left.
It does make it a glamorous job is that's $100 million or whatever if they go after some big name, whatever they'd offer them, that does make it a glamorous job. And you're reminding me of the cheaters story that was such an awesome story because no one in the country outside of East Lansing and Columbus cared a lick about that story, because I certainly did not care at all about the Connor Stallion story. I don't know. It seemed like a big nothing burger to me. And when the national championship, stop crying about it. Stone Shield Show coming up here right now. Here, thank you guys so much. We'll see you tomorrow. It's supposed to snow a lot tomorrow. Stay safe. See you guys.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. We are live. It is Thursday, December 11th. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us through Off the Bench into our show here this morning. Got an exciting show planned out. Travis Steele will join us in about 5 minutes, head coach of the Miami Redhawks basketball team. We had Chuck Martin on last week, and looking forward to having Coach Steele on the show today. They are undefeated. How about that? The Miami Redhawks, really what he's been building over the past 4 years, really quietly developing a really nice program. They were just seconds away from playing in March Madness, getting into the big dance last year. Akron's able to kind of beat them basically at the buzzer in the MAC title game. They're on the outside looking in, ultimately don't make it, but it was a great year last year, and they're off to a brilliant start here this year. They have not dropped a game. Faced some adversity in the game last night. They played UNC Asheville, and they were up 18 at one point in the second half, blew that lead, and ends up going to overtime, and they faced that adversity, do a great job, overcome that, and ultimately win the game and stay undefeated. So we're going to have Coach Steele on the show. Looking forward to that. Going to ask him about last night's game. Going to ask him about some NIL portal stuff and just kind of how he's changed, right? This is a guy that was the head coach at Xavier and when he was in his 30s, a young head coach at a big-time job, had some success there, but ultimately they go in a different direction. He gets the Miami job right away and has really done a nice job here as he kind of gets into his 40s, gets a little bit older, and he's done a terrific job, and really excited to talk to Coach Steele in a couple of minutes here on the show, so make sure you stick around for that. Also, we'll talk Joe Burrow's press conference on the show. It was funny. We've been talking a lot about Joe Burrow press conferences here on the show. Burrow, of course, for much of the year wasn't having press conferences because he was hurt, and times that he has spoke, it's really turned a lot of heads, right? You saw the game after Baltimore and how thankful he was just to be back and how emotional he was after a big-time win on Thanksgiving night. And then he has kind of the interesting comments after the game, immediately following the loss, just kind of somber, right? And then a strange mood kind of at his press conference yesterday, and it's got Twitter freaking out. It's got Bengals fans freaking out. Reed Mouse said on Off the Bench that he's not really freaking out yet, and not necessarily turning a blind eye towards it, but he's not ready to overreact to some of those comments. I do think it is interesting, some of the things he said and the tone in which he said it, because it didn't feel very Joe Burrow-like, right? We always talk about Burrow being a psycho competitor and kind of a maniac out there, and it was kind of like, yeah, I'm just trying to have fun again. Got a lot of stuff going on the football field, off the football field. Didn't really expand on those comments. Don't think many people expected him to, but I'll kind of have my thoughts on that as well. We'll break down exactly what he said. And look, the Cincinnati Bengals organization, they're holding on by a thread, right? And some would argue they're not even holding on. Well, if you lose him, you're cooked for a very, very long time. So we'll break down some of his comments and my thoughts on that as well. Story of the day, Chiron Moore. He gets fired at Michigan. Got a lot of thoughts on that as well. With cause, apparently had an inappropriate relationship with a staffer and he was gone, and some of the other stuff that's come out after that, police detaining him. We're not going to get into all the specifics of that. There's still a lot of things that aren't, proven facts yet, but it is a proven fact that he had an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. And, we'll talk about some potential replacements there. The Chiron Moore era, obviously a disaster, and this is a complete embarrassment for Michigan, their university, their athletic departments, and just the brand, the Michigan brand. This takes a huge hit, and the timing of it too is not good. National Signing Day, or the early signing period, is in the past, right? What are your commits going to do? You got a quarterback that you're paying $20 million, who definitely probably underperformed, but was a true freshman playing, Bryce Underwood. Is he going to stick around? Is he going to hit the portal? So lots of questions to be answered for Michigan. Biff Poggi will be their interim guy, and it'll be interesting to see, when they make a hire. Is it before the bowl game? Are they going to sit on this thing? I think there's a world where Biff Poggi gets the interim tag for the 2026 year, and they do a search after that. Nobody's really talking about that, but I do think that is a possibility, and we'll kind of break down that whole scandal. And I'm not going to get into all the rumors, the he said, she said, but I think there is some stuff that you can say definitely happened and is a definite fact, and we'll talk a little bit about that job opening there as well. Additionally, Thursday night football tonight, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they take on the Atlanta Falcons. And the Buccaneers, they started out the season so hot. I was talking playoffs for the Buccaneers. I was talking, they might have a chance to win a playoff game. And, not to say that that isn't going to happen anymore. I think that still very much is a possibility at this point. But they find themselves 7-6. They're tied with the Carolina Panthers. And the Falcons have been a disaster, right? The quarterback that they took earlier than they should have, Michael Penix, he goes down with an injury. And, they got Kirk Cousins, and they just got blown out by the Seattle Seahawks. They got a solid defense, so I think it could potentially be a compelling football game. But we'll break down Thursday night football. Baker Mayfield in action, always fun to watch him. 4.5 points is the spread in favor of Tampa Bay. So we'll preview that game a little bit on today's show as well, and I'll have some thoughts on that. Additionally, some sports headlines to close out the show today. We'll talk about the Ravens. I think a lot of people expected them to be true Super Bowl contenders this year, and they, unlike the Bengals, have a much better chance at getting into the playoffs, but I think it would be shocking, I would say, if you saw the Baltimore Ravens win a playoff game. So they got some questions that they need to answer, right? Is Harbaugh potentially done? He's been here, the head coach, so long, obviously won a Super Bowl, won a ton of games. Could they, Eric DeCosta and ownership, perhaps turn in a different direction with him? We'll talk about the job security of Mike Tomlin there as well. Don't look now, but they just continue to win, and now they're in the driver's seat for getting back to the playoffs and having a winning season. And it seems like we do this each and every year with Pittsburgh, right, where there's just so much controversy surrounding the program, and everyone's talking about, this might be it for Mike Tomlin. They're winning and have a winning record, but they aren't very good. Kind of shuts them up if they get into the playoffs once again. And again, they have the driver's seat after a nice win last week. We talked on the show about, the catch rule there with Likely in the end zone, not really understanding what the heck was going on with that, right? To me, it looked like caught it in the end zone 1, 2, 3 feet down, then the ball comes out. Well, it's not the 40-yard line, it's the end zone. And as far as I know, when you break the pylon, you break the goal line in the end zone, it's a touchdown. That got taken off the board, and Pittsburgh obviously reaps the benefits of that, and they get a big-time victory and take control of the AFC North division. Some baseball stuff. The Reds, of course, missed out on Kyle Schwarber. We talked about that a lot yesterday. There were some rumors that the Reds actually offered $150 million, which I'm not quite sure I believe. Bob Nightingale, I believe, is who reported that. Previously, it was reported that it was just $125. Of course, Schwarber is signing for $150 with the Philadelphia Phillies to go back there. And again, I don't fault him at all for doing that, to stay with the team that he's been with for several years. It's won a lot of ball games with, and they're willing to pay him $150 million as a designated hitter. I think, a lot of people are upset that he didn't come to Cincinnati, but usually when you're talking about the Reds and the Bengals, they put these offers out there, and they're just not good offers, right? They're borderline disrespectful offers. We've seen that in the past. Remember, Andrew Whitworth is one name with the Bengals that, of course, comes to mind. 125 over 5 years for a DH, that is a more than fair offer for the Cincinnati Reds to give Kyle Schwarber. He got more from Philadelphia. Trace Fowler, Nick Kirby, they've kind of detailed on Chatterbox Reds their thoughts on that. It kind of feels like Philly was just going to do whatever it took to retain Kyle Schwarber. Keep in mind, when I look at the Philadelphia Phillies, I look at them as kind of that second team in the National League. Some people would argue and say otherwise. I know the Mets have more money and spend more money, but they were a disaster at the end of last year. But I view them as kind of that top team on paper that can compete with a team like the Los Angeles Dodgers. And to let a guy like Schwarber go, who's kind of a mainstay at the top of their lineup, hits a ton of home runs, they couldn't afford to lose him, and they also couldn't afford to get outbid by the Cincinnati Reds too, right? I think there's an element to that as well, where it's like, we're going to let this small market team that doesn't pay free agents at all bid us for this guy. I don't think Philadelphia was going to let that happen. Some reports have come out that, Schwarber did have real interest in the Cincinnati Reds, but at the end of the day, he wanted to stay in Philadelphia, was just kind of going through the process of talking to different players, what have you. But ultimately, he ends up going back to Philadelphia. The Reds miss on him, and we'll see what they do going forward. Nick Kral's come out and said they were kind of making an exception to the rule, bringing in Kyle Schwarber. I talked about on the show yesterday how they said those comments, and the push for Kyle Schwarber allegedly was to increase ticket sales and revenue, which is kind of crazy to say, that a singular player would be able to transcend your ticket sales. I think maybe in the short term, yeah, but over the course of 5 years, no, I don't think so. And they're going to pivot away from, spending that kind of money on another player, which kind of has a lot of us shaking our head because we're like, okay, we heard the budget now is $5 to $10 million, but you were getting ready to pay Kyle Schwarber $25 million. So that tells us the money is there. You can do it. You're just choosing not to do it, which is frustrating for a lot of us, and certainly frustrating certainly for the fan base there as well. And they've been linked to some other names. Ketel Marte, Nick Kirby and Craig Sandlin had a video that went out today, a podcast as well. Check that out if you haven't done so already. But a Ketel Marte type of player that you would need to probably give up a big-time arm for, maybe even a Hunter Green. I just don't know. He's a great player. Don't get me wrong. He's an unbelievable player. He's a great bat and can provide offense and defense to your lineup. But you want to lose a guy like Hunter Green to get him. I don't know if it's worth it, right? Schwarber, of course, was a free agent. They just needed to sign him and pay him. They wouldn't necessarily lose anything directly that they have currently on the roster. But it kind of feels like at this point they're going to be somewhat running it back with the same group in which they have right now here, in kind of the same lineup, right? I think you're going to see a lot of the same guys that get asked to kind of just improve their roles. And we were worried about this when the season ended with the Cincinnati Reds. It's like, okay, you went to the playoffs, you played the Los Angeles Dodgers. It didn't work out for you, but you went and, you got some of that experience. You couldn't afford to just run it back with the same group that you had and expect to have a different result and expect to get further into the postseason just because some guys were going to develop and get a little bit better. And ultimately, that didn't end up happening, or it hasn't happened yet to this point for the Cincinnati Reds. And you hear Tito kind of talk about guys, right, like a Spencer Steer, a Matt McClain. It's going to be a lot of the same guys coming back, and they're all going to have to elevate their performance. So we'll see how the Cincinnati Reds continue to handle this offseason here. Obviously, a lot of questions. Kind of a heartbreaking day. When Kyle Schwarber ultimately decides to go back to Philadelphia. Wouldn't say I was surprised, but as time went on, it felt like there was more of a chance, of course, that he would return home to Cincinnati, but ultimately that does not happen. All right, it is time to welcome in our guest. He is the head coach of the Miami of Ohio University basketball team, and his name is Travis Steele. Coach, how are we doing here this morning? Appreciate you hanging out with us here.
Doing well. Excited to be on here. Appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. Thanks so much for making some time. I know it's busy, but let's start with last night. Obviously, Redhawks in action last night against UNC Asheville. Kind of a crazy game, right? Had a big lead, 18 points at one point in the second half. The lead goes away. It evaporates, which I'm sure is a little bit frustrating, but ultimately you get it to overtime. You come out on top, you face some adversity, and win the game and stay undefeated. Just kind of walk us through what exactly transpired last night.
Yeah, obviously got off to a great start. I thought we were getting great looks in the first half and really for the first 35 minutes of the game. And, I told our group we can't play not to lose at the end. You got to continue to play to win, right? And scared money never wins. I thought we passed up some shots during those last 5 to 6 minutes of the game and give Asheville credit. They made some really hard shots and they were getting to the free throw line and just made the game really choppy. They were scoring while the clock was stopped. So, but it's good for us to be in those moments. That'll help prepare us for MAC play, where we'll be in several close games throughout the year. So our ability to execute down the stretch, getting it into overtime, and then executing at the end of overtime as well will really serve us well moving forward.
When you look at some of these stats, you guys are having a lot of success, particularly on the offensive end. And going into last night, 4th in the country in effective field goal percentage, 6th in field goal percentage, 11th in free throw percentage. What has made you guys that productive, would you say, on that end of the floor?
I think, number one, we have really good players.
Yeah.
And we have skilled guys. They play the right way. We have a very, very balanced attack. We have honestly, we have eight, 9 guys that can all score in double figures on any given night. And I think that makes us very hard to prepare for. And our guys make the right plays. They share the ball. I think our ball really moves. We play really fast. We shoot a lot of threes, but we also get to the free throw line a lot. So we're a good mixture of kind of how we can score, and we can score in different ways. And I think that shows.
You guys get Peter Sudter back, which obviously is huge. MAC preseason, first team, was on the team last year. And with this NIL transfer portal era, I'm sure it was stressful, wondering if he was going to come back or not. But just talk to us what it's like coaching him, the type of player he is, and what exactly he brings to the table. And I know he was a little bit banged up in the game last night as well.
Yeah, he was the first guy I met with in the offseason. And he said before I could even talk, he said, "Hey, Coach, can I say something?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Hey, listen, I'm not going anywhere. I've never been happier, never played better in my life." And for him to say that, man, I think shows, number one, just the character that he has and the family that his parents are awesome, Rick and Kim. And he's a tremendous player. He impacts the game in every way possible, defensively, offensively. He rebounds. He usually guards the other team's best player. He play makes for us. He scores. He's just that ultimate Swiss Army knife. I think he's an all-conference guy. He'll be up for Conference Player of the Year, as he should be.
Year 4 for you here at Miami. And since you took the job, what would you say when you initially took it was kind of your long-term vision for the program, and how would you say you're realizing it here to this point several years in?
I told David Saylor, our athletic director, it was going to probably take until year 3 to see significant growth in our program. We were going to do it the slow route, which a lot of people are building their programs through transfer portal. Mm-hmm. Well, we've went the exact opposite route. We've done it more through high school, but we had to be patient in order to do it that way, and give our administration a lot of credit. They were patient with me. Year 1, we were horrendous. Year 2, we were a little bit better. And then year 3, we had a chance. We were in the conference championship game last year and led for 39 minutes and 56 seconds of the game, and unfortunately didn't come out on top. But we won 25 games and had a great year. And then, obviously it's led into we're 9-0 here to start this year. I think my biggest thing was just finding guys that fit me, that fit our program, our men's basketball program, and our university. And we wanted to be a team that was going to be very good on offense. We've recruited a lot of skill, high IQ, tough kids that compete, man, winners. You look at even the local guys that we have from Cincinnati. Ian Elmer won a state title his junior year at Taft High School. Mm-hmm. Evan Ipsaro was over at Covcath. I consider that Cincinnati, right across the bridge. So he ultimate winner. Trey Perry, young man from Lakota East, where Clint Atkins is a tremendous coach. Oh, yeah. Ultimate winner. We've recruited winners, and I think that's really helped in building this program back to where it used to be.
Travis Steele, head coach of the Miami Redhawks, joining us here for a couple more minutes. With winning, obviously you get more eyeballs on your program and more people outside Oxford paying attention to what you do. For those that aren't necessarily close to your program and follow you closely, what would you say you want the identity of your team in Miami Redhawk basketball to be nationally?
We're going to be the most connected team in the country.
Yeah.
I think if you watch us play, number one, our guys get along extremely well. We have a lot of fun together. Which makes this journey incredible, even through the highs and the lows, because there are highs and lows, right? Throughout a season, it's a journey. But I think it comes to life with the way that we play defensively. We are ultra connected. We move as one. All 5 guys are involved on the play. It's not just, hey, I'm guarding the ball and I'm making sure my man's not scoring. It's all 5 guys working together. And then same thing on the offensive end. The way that our ball moves and the pace that we play at, our guys really pride themselves in making the extra pass, getting as many paint touches as we can, breaking the paint, and then spraying and playing because we got a lot of shooters. So I think we make that come to life. And then I would add not just being the most connected team, but just tough, competitive, chip on your shoulder, belief, that swagger. Like, I don't care who we play, where we play. We think we're the best team on the floor every single night.
Obviously, you started as head coach at Xavier, a big-time job a couple of years ago. How would you say you have evolved and changed as a coach personally? And is there something that maybe when you were a younger coach that you believed one way that now you have a different viewpoint? Or however these last few years, how have you changed as a head coach?
Yeah, I think you just got to learn to be your own guy.
Yeah.
I can't be Chris Mack, can't be Sean Miller, can't be Kelvin Sampson, Thad Matta, or my brother John Gross. Man, I'm Travis Steele. And I think number one, I think you start to learn really how to build a culture, I think, which is so important because I think that creates sustainable success. And I've learned through my experiences of how to do that. And we've created that here at Miami. And then obviously you're always having that growth mindset. Is there things, how can you do things better, right? Offensively, defensively. I think offensively, we're one of the harder teams to prepare for in the country for the way that we run our offense. It's not as many set plays. It's more flow and concepts, and makes us very, very difficult to scout. And that's how we built the program. Because we got to win in March, right? We got to win the MAC tournament. How can you beat a team for a third time?
Right.
I think that's so important to understand. Like, anybody can beat a team on the first time, but after you get used to playing that opponent, like, we want to be the team that's very random and very hard to prepare for and hard to play against in the third time that we see an opponent.
I was talking with Chuck Martin about this last week. Obviously, we all love the MAC because it's so competitive and seemingly any team can beat any other team on any given night. Still a couple games away from conference play, but what are some keys, do you think, for your team to have success in conference play, and what's kind of the overall outlook of the MAC here this year?
Yeah, you mentioned Chuck. Chuck's incredible, by the way. He's a one of one.
Yep.
We're lucky to have him here. I think MAC play, it's going to come down. You got to be top 3 in both defense and offense in order to win the league. You got to be a two-way team, and that's what we really try to pride ourselves on is, because you're probably going to have one off shooting night. Mm-hmm. Odds are in 3 games in 3 days. Can you win that game? Can you win different ways, right? So I always go back to rebounding differential, right? Turnover differential. Teams that get more shots up usually have an advantage, right? So can you rebound the ball, take care of the ball, and defend? We're going to be able to score. There's no doubt in my mind. But you look at the MAC has had a great non-conference so far. I mean, Akron's doing terrific. Kent State, Buffalo, Bowling Green, Eastern Michigan's had some good wins. Like, there's been a lot of really good. UMass beat Boston College last night. So, like, our league, I think, is as strong as it's been since I've been in the league.
Is there a guy on the roster that's maybe made a really big leap behind the scenes? You touched on Perry. I went to Lakota East, very familiar with Clint Atkins myself. Maybe he's a guy. He's obviously getting some minutes. But anybody behind the scenes that you've been really impressed with that in a matter of time is really going to have a big role for you?
Yeah, I think the guy who made the biggest jump in the offseason was Evan Absaro.
Mm-hmm.
Evan is an absolute dog. He's me on the floor. He's a much better player than I ever was. Let's make that very clear. But like he just complete trust. He can score it. He can pass it. He's defending at a really high level right now. I mean, like he is Man, he's a winner. But I think the freshmen are picking up things. You see Trey Carroll, like last night, I think he's a microwave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he can really score the ball in bunches. He's super confident. And he's got that swagger and that belief to him. And he's growing on the defensive end. And that's where I've really challenged him is, hey, you can go get 11 points, but you can't give up 10, right? You got to be, and it's not on the ball for him. It's been more off the ball defensively, just getting better. That'll put him in even a better position on the ball.
And final question for you, Coach. Not going to ask you to get on your soapbox here, but you can if you would like. When it comes to NIL and the transfer portal, how challenging is that when you're recruiting? Like, how do you have to recruit differently now in this era? And also, how do you balance the portal and high school recruits? I know you mentioned earlier that you guys are probably more focused on high school recruits, but I know there's definitely a balance to that there as well.
Yeah, I think you just have to lean into it, you know, rather than complain about it. And it is what it is. You know, it's went from 0 to 100. Feels like there was a million rules, and now there's no rules. But you know, he's got to kind of lean into it. And I think, you know, we use high schools as the main source, transfer as supplement. But you know, I think, you know, for us, you know, it's like I tell our players all the time: your experience here is our recruiting pitch.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sell anybody on staying here. I want guys that want to be here and want to be here for the right reasons. I want guys that want to be here to win because of our culture and development. And that's the staff. I got a great staff here, great coaches that work with our guys every single day that I can confidently say that's what we're best at. We're better than anybody else in college basketball at that. And, you know, so again, the NIL, do I think our guys should make money? I absolutely do. They do. I think they should. But I think a lot of these young men are making decisions, short-term decisions, that have huge ramifications for them long-term that maybe negatively impact them. But it's hard, right? That's most of society, right? Most of society lives day to day. And I want our young men to make the best decisions for them in the next 10 to 15 years, and whatever that is. And I'll support them. Right. And we want to develop our young men. It's all about fit. I will say, I think fit's more important than ever in this landscape. If you get guys that fit the culture and fit your program and fit the head coach, I think you have a much better chance of keeping your young men.
No doubt. You got a favorite spot up there in Oxford, Coach? I was always at Doby's a lot. Do you got any favorites up there?
Man, there's a lot of good spots up here. Pisano's is incredible. I love Sohai.
Oh, yeah.
I love Ox Vegas Chicken is another. It's a new spot. I love that big spot right there. You know, again, there's a lot of good restaurants up here.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Coach, I appreciate you making some time from one Red Hawk to another. I certainly appreciate it. Best of luck the rest of the way, and would love to do it again sometime, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Coach Travis Steele, head coach of the Miami Redhawks. Awesome stuff from him. We certainly appreciate him taking some time after a big-time win last night in overtime. Had to face some adversity, certainly, but the Redhawks came out on top. They're a fun bunch this year. They're building something special there in Oxford. I remember really tapping into them last year, and they're going on this run through the MAC tournament. Just barely came up short in that title game, but this is a team with high expectations, and as you mentioned, you've really seen improvement over the course of these years with Travis Steele at the helm, so we certainly appreciate him making some time. Would love to have him on again in the near future, and best of luck to the Redhawks the rest of the way. Great stuff, Travis Steele. That will be out on YouTube later today, and of course in podcast form there as well. Check that out, that interview with Travis Steele. Also, if you're just now tuning in, Reed Mouse, he had Richard Pitino on this morning right at 10 o'clock. That was also an awesome interview. That will be out on YouTube later today there as well. So if you missed it, that's all right. It'll be out in podcast form and be out on YouTube additionally as well. All right, let's fully dive into this Joe Burrow stuff. We talked about it at the top, how, you know, he had spoke obviously after the game against Buffalo, and, you know, we've kind of noticed some things recently with Joe Burrow at the podium. Didn't get him at the podium when he was hurt, missed a ton of time with that toe injury, and then after the Raven game really was kind of emotional. We hadn't really seen that side of him. Clearly very happy to be back, and it kind of has done a 180 ever since that game. We had after the loss, it was kind of like, that's not really the Joe Burrow that we're used to seeing. Just kind of, that's the way the cookie crumbles this year. And it's like, that didn't seem like Joe Burrow. And then very interesting his comments yesterday there as well. And I'm watching the press conference live, and I'm like, well, this doesn't feel great. And I had a feeling that it was going to explode on Twitter and the internet, and it certainly did. As kind of the fan base was in a frenzy, and you got people nationally talking about it too. Like, oh, is the end nearing here with Joe Burrow? Is the writing on the wall? Is he not going to be the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals for the long term? And it's easy to hit the panic button when it comes to that. I don't have an issue really with people hitting the panic button. It's easy to overreact to it as well. Reed on Off the Bench kind of took the route of I'm not going to turn a blind eye to it, but I'm not going to turn it into something it isn't. And I think he's right for the most part, but I do think it is worth being a little bit concerned about, if I'm being completely honest, because this organization is holding on by a thread. Literally a thread. And some would argue it's not even holding on, right? But the thread that is holding this thing together is Joe Burrow. And if he wants to get out of here, go somewhere else, not play anymore, this thing's going to completely blow up. You think it's ugly now, right? You think it's painful now? Well, if you remove Joe Burrow from this equation, it's going to get a heck of a lot worse. And I've said this multiple times on the show. There's no way to, understand whether this is true or not, but in my opinion, if you mess things up during the Joe Burrow era and you can't win playoff games more than what you've already done in the past in the Joe Burrow era, it's never going to work here, ever, regardless of who you bring in, because it's going to be the same ownership family. We'll see how long Duke Tobin's allowed to stick around, but once that family's here and it's still the Bengals, right, and if you couldn't win with him, couldn't have success with him, this whole thing is going to get a heck of a lot uglier than it already is. So that's where my mind goes. And, I've talked about this on the show. When I'm watching the Cincinnati Bengals, is there things to be frustrated? Yes, right? The defense, right? The offensive line at one point, although they're playing well now. The coaching has been an issue. Certainly the personnel, right, has been awful. The players in which you're drafting, lots to be frustrated. But, I used to get really worked up about that kind of stuff and really mad about it. But as a fan, I'm not talking as, the host of the show here. I'm just talking as a fan. I've been able to pivot off that and say, you know what, Joe Burrow's here. As long as he's here, it's going to be entertaining to watch. As long as he is here, we still have a chance. And as long as he's here, I'm going to give everything I have into this team from a fan's perspective because it's a heck of a lot of fun to watch him play. So when you hear comments like that, your mind immediately goes to the worst. And you're like, oh, my goodness, what if he is not here with the Cincinnati Bengals? And look, that's not something that's going to happen next year, right? He will be back for next year, and it's not something that will happen after that either. But he talks about the fun, losing the fun in the game of football. And to me, I was thinking about this and texting with a buddy about this. The fun for Joe Burrow, obviously he loves the game. In order to be in the NFL, you have to love the game at some point. Does he love it as much as he did when he was a kid or at LSU? Maybe not, right? But he loved the game as a kid. All these quarterbacks did. That's how they get to this point. You can't not love the game at some point in your life and get to this point. But I think for him, especially after the success they had early in his career, after the knee injury, of course, as a rookie, the fun for him is postseason. Right, is chasing postseason, is going on a postseason run. And when you have a guy of his caliber at that position, you should be making the playoffs every single year, right? Regardless of your offensive line, regardless of your defense, regardless of the coaching, regardless of the scouting, regardless of the personnel, you should be making the playoffs each and every year. He played all the games last year. You didn't make it. And T and Jamar, for the most part, were healthy throughout the duration of the year as well. That's really hard to wrap your head around, right? I mean, you watched the game against Buffalo Sunday, right? He was doing that all last year, and he had Jamar and T out there with him, and you were losing games left and right and couldn't make the playoffs. And then this year, of course, he gets hurt, right? But all you needed was one. I mean, certainly 2 or 3, you'd be in a great spot, but literally one more win without him. And again, you got competent quarterback play from Joe Flacco. Side tangent, all the people say, oh, you can still win with Flacco. Is Flacco doing that in Buffalo? We love Joe Flacco. We love what he's done here, but absolutely not. He's not. All right, let's be real. But the quarterback play there was fine. It was serviceable. It was as good as you could have hoped for on your third quarterback with Joe Flacco, right? And that still wasn't enough to even get an extra win. So he's just kind of exasperated. And he understands that, if you turn the ball over twice in Buffalo against Josh Allen, odds are you're not going to win. But how great he was before that, he's just like, I can't even make one mistake out here, and we're going to lose. So I think you're seeing that bubble up, that frustration. I mentioned this on Off the Bench as well. For us, the reality of this season sunk in a long time ago, several weeks ago, right? Probably, in my opinion, after the Bear game is when it really sunk in, like, you know what? This is going to be a team, once again, that misses the playoffs. That's when I kind of had, because I called that game a must-win game for the Bengals against Chicago at home. And, you were losing most of the game, and then you, by a miracle, get back in it and have the lead, and then Bengal fashion, you lose it there at the end. But to me, losing that game, that was it for the postseason. Well, Joe Burrow's not wired like that. As he was motivated towards trying to come back, I guarantee you, I haven't spoken with Joe, obviously, but in his mind, he's thinking, I'm going to come back and we're going to run the table and we're going to get into the playoffs. And then for him, the moment that we had, or that I had during the Bear Week, some of you had it before that, some of you had it maybe a week or two after that, he didn't have that moment until this week, until losing to the Buffalo Bills, where he sits up there and he goes, oh, shoot, we can run the table here, and it's still not going to probably happen for the Cincinnati Bengals. So that moment that we all had as fans where this thing's over, we're not making the playoffs, he didn't have that moment until this week, right? So I think that's why you're kind of seeing some of the frustration that you saw in the press conference, right? You couple that with what I said earlier about him not making the playoffs. The reason that he has fun in this game, the reason that he is here, is to go on the run in the postseason. He believes he's the caliber of player that should be in the postseason each and every year. And now you look, 3 straight years, the Bengals have been out. Now, if he's been healthy for all 3 of those years, I don't think that's the case, right? I think a healthy Joe Burrow this year wins the AFC North, right? I didn't think that before the year, but I didn't expect the Ravens to be this bad. Right, if you just insert a healthy Joe Burrow into this Bengals team, regardless of the issues on defense, I think they're in the driver's seat at this point in the AFC North. Last year he was healthy the whole year, wasn't able to happen. Then the year prior to that had the injury there as well with the wrist. So I think that's where you're kind of seeing some of the frustration lie. Now the question becomes after that, is he frustrated with the organization, or is he just kind of mourning not making the playoffs again? I would hope it's just the playoff thing. But there's plenty of reason to be frustrated with this organization. But also, the organization pretty much has done exactly what Joe Burrow has wanted, right? Let's be very clear here. The Bengals were not bringing back T. Higgins until Joe Burrow was banging the table for T. Higgins, right? And then they're like, oh, Joe said it, so we got to go out there and do it. They did it, right? They obviously were going to pay Jamar. We know that. I don't know if they bring back Mike Gesicki, if Joe Burrow wasn't pounding the table. He did. I don't know if they give Trey Hendrickson that raise if Joe Burrow wasn't pounding the table. He did. They did, right? So they've done, say what you want about the Bengals organization, they deserve a lot of crap, trust me. But as far as Joe Burrow's, don't want to say demands, but his asks, pretty much checked all the boxes, right? And you've kind of seen this in the past, like, well, you don't want your star players being involved with personnel stuff. I kind of took a different standpoint with Joe Burrow, just because the nature of this Bengals organization, how dysfunctional they've been throughout the course of my life, and you have this talent at the most important position that's such a great player. I'm like, well, let's not take him off. Let's do what he wants, right? Is it coming back to bite him? I'm not ready to say that personally. I still will stand here today and say it was the right thing to pay T and pay Jamar and pay Joe, so you kept those 3 guys together. Makes things difficult defensively, and you're seeing that. But again, in the what-if world, in fairyland, right, what isn't reality, I think the Bengals are a playoff team, regardless of how bad their defense is, if Joe didn't get hurt this year and was out there throughout the entirety of the year. So he's frustrated, clearly. I do believe there is an opt-out in his contract after 27. And, maybe he opts out regardless just to try to get more money. Again, though, that kind of is a counter-argument to, or it's counterintuitive to what I was saying about, Joe wanting postseason success, where it's like, well, if he opts out of that and wants more money, it's like, well, do you want more money when you're getting paid $50+ million, or do you want to have a better roster to go to a Super Bowl, right? So, I don't know. So a lot of people probably think he will opt out, whether it be for financial reasons or if he wants to try to get out of here in Cincinnati. And I do think these next 2 years are so big, right, for Joe. And again, you got your fingers crossed that he doesn't have another major injury that he can't play through, because that's got to take a toll on you mentally. And that's another element to this I think some people are failing to understand. Like, we see Joe Burrow, and he's this superstar, and he's this great player. He's also a human being, right? Can you imagine putting all that work in and being as good as he is at his job and then just constantly getting hurt? I mean, it's really starting to stockpile all the injuries that he's had and the adversity that he's had to overcome. And then he comes back and plays great, and it's still not enough. So that's got to take a toll on you mentally. And, I've said this before, that is worst case scenario. I try not to overreact with anything with this team. But if Joe Burrow ultimately is playing for a different team or wants out, that is a nightmare situation for the Bengals. Sound the alarms, hit all the panic buttons. You're in deep trouble, right? if you're the city of Cincinnati, if you're the Bengals organization, and certainly if you're this fan base, if he wants out. Now, there's still some time to get this fixed, right? He will be back next year. And again, you go into next year saying there is absolutely no way you should miss the playoffs. Well, we said that this year, and we said it last year as well. And then you had the risk the year before. That was kind of a fluky thing. But they shouldn't have missed the playoffs any of these years, and they have consistently. So we'll see. And then the other element is that what if he just doesn't want to play football anymore? I'm not suggesting that's the case, right? We see Joe Burrow, the guy, the maniac that worked to come back here with his toe injury, to come back on a bad team and have a Hail Mary chance of getting to the playoffs. He still is driven, and I think certainly after maybe a couple of weeks this offseason, regroup, hopefully he can get to the offseason healthy and go from there, right? But I think he'll kind of get that juice back in him after that and be motivated for next year. But people used to compare him to Andrew Luck, and I used to kind of laugh at it and say, come on, Joe Burrow, he's a crazy competitor, no shot. Well, now he's a couple years ago talking about his football mortality, and now he has this press conference where he's like, I got to try to have fun again, or else what's the point of doing it? I would be shocked if he stepped away from the game. I would be incredibly shocked if he did. But let's not act like he needs the money. He's made enough money. He can make a heck of a lot more, but he's made plenty of money to suit him and his family the rest of his life. Ultimately, if that's a decision that he felt like he needed to be made. Now, luckily, he hasn't had head injuries, but he's had, lots of other bodily injuries. I think it's worth talking about at some point, especially when he has a press conference like that. So I don't want to overreact to any of his comments, but I do think the takeaway from that is not great, right? That's kind of my takeaway. Not great. I don't want to sit here and say, he's leaving, we're cooked. That's it. It's over. But at the same time, it's not all sunshine and rainbows here. And winning cures it all. Winning fixes everything. Unfortunately for the Bengals, I think it's too little too late regardless of what they do. If they run the table, they still need a ton of help. We understand that. I think it's safe to say that they're not making the playoffs this year. But it'll be very interesting to monitor kind of his tone, what he has to say. And look, unfortunately, it's going to be must-see TV or must-see streaming when Joe Burrow takes the podium from here until the next time you make the playoffs, right? Now, as someone that is not making $50 million a year, there's part of me that says, show up, play the best you can. You're the quarterback. Try to overcome this thing. You're getting paid a ton of money. You're really good. Try to figure this thing out. There's a part of me that thinks that, right? But there's also the human element of that. Okay, put the money aside. And he's just, a regular guy out there that's been getting hurt left and right. He's faced all this adversity. He's played really, really well, and his team has not really helped him out from a defensive perspective, from an offensive line perspective. I understand that, but my takeaway is don't sound the alarm, but not great. Not great is my takeaway. And, we'll see. We'll monitor that situation over the course of the next few weeks, and we'll see how he continues to respond, how he continues to play, and go from there. But you start thinking about him in a different uniform, and you're like, golly. I mean, shoot. If it was a trade situation, McVay would give him 4 first-rounders to Cincinnati and get Burrow over there, and they would hardly lose games. They would win left and right. But obviously that's a nightmare situation for Bengals fans, and don't think we need to fully have that discussion here. Don't want to overreact, but not great. Chiron Moore. What a mess for the Michigan football team. They win the national title. Harbaugh leaves, surrounded by so much controversy. You had the Connor Stallions thing, which to me, the sign stealing, I wasn't all worked up about it, but it caused people to get suspended, so that's noteworthy. Chiron Moore was suspended again this year, and if he was back, I think there was reports that he's probably going to face another suspension next year. So I am not an Ohio State fan by any stretch of the imagination, but, this feels just kind of dirty. Just the Michigan football program, there is a dark dimness to it at this point, and it's kind of nasty, really, to be honest with you. And that's even before this issue with Chiron Moore, and now it's kind of getting capped with this. So if you haven't been on the internet or if you haven't turned on a TV over the course of the past 24 hours, Michigan has fired Chiron Moore with cause, inappropriate relationship with a staffer, and yes, Chiron Moore is married with kids. And unfortunately, this day and age, we've seen this happen more than once. It's hard for me to understand. And I'll kind of just leave it at that. I don't want to kind of get into the weeds of what exactly happened. There's a lot of rumors circulating. The police got involved, and there's a lot of rumors out there. Not a lot has been confirmed, but one thing that can be confirmed is that he has been fired, and it was with cause because he had an inappropriate relationship with the staff. Now, from a football perspective, for me personally, he's getting fired anyway, even if he wasn't married, right? I mean, if you have a relationship like that with a subordinate, you can't do that. So he's getting fired anyway. But to me, the reason it's so gross and disgusting is that he's married with kids. It's like, what the world are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself, and you're just kind of an awful human being, if we're just being completely honest here. But from a football perspective, this is a disaster for Michigan, right? Because they just had the early signing period. Right, so this is an awful time to get rid of your coach. They're scrambling right now. Biff Poggi is their interim guy. He was their interim guy when Chiron was suspended this year. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it. Again, all of the big-time candidates have either gone, Lane Kiffin, or have gotten re-upped at their respective schools and are staying put. Now, the Michigan job's huge, right? But again, we've talked about this a lot on the show. The Michigan job now is not the Michigan job pre-NIL, right? You saw Kurt Cignetti say, Penn State, I'm good. I'm staying right here at Indiana, right? I don't care about all the games he's won. If this is pre-NIL, he's not staying at Indiana, right? But he's like, they can pay me a ton of money. They're backing me. I'm older. All I've done is won here. Heck yeah, I'm staying. And I agree with his decision now to stay. But he wouldn't do that pre-NIL, right? Same thing kind of with when Saban left. Like, part of me is thinking, like, oh, my goodness, how could you not want this job? Obviously, there's a ton of pressure, placing a legend, all that. Now, DeBoer was their guy from the start, but it's like Lanning was like, yeah, I'm good. Kirby was like, I went to Georgia. What are you talking about? I'm not leaving. Sark was like, I'm not leaving either. Now, Greg Burns' guy was Kalen DeBoer, but like to see those guys not even have any interest in the Bama job was kind of like, oh, wow, like we really are in a different era right now. So the Michigan job is a high-profile job, but there's a lot of controversy surrounding the program right now, a lot of scandals, a lot of just grimy stuff with Michigan, and it'll be interesting to see how they feel it. I think there is a world where they say, you know what, where we're at right now, Biff, you've been a head coach before. You coached us in the interim there when Chiron was suspended. Maybe we'll let you just ride this thing out for 2026, try to keep you on staff after that, and then we'll have a big-time head coaching search after 2026. There are some other names that come to mind. Jed Fish is probably near the top of that list. I think he was kind of, going into the season, people kind of said, Napier's probably not going to make it another year at Florida. There were some ties to Florida with Jed Fish. He was kind of a name thrown around. Obviously, they went in a different direction with Summerall. He's a guy to monitor. He hasn't done great things at Washington, but they're a solid team, solid program. I think he's a solid coach, and that's kind of a safe hire. It's like he'll come in, he'll stabilize this thing. He's not going to embarrass himself or us as a university, and that's key here, right? Like even if Lane Kiffin wasn't at LSU, like after this disaster, do you really want to figure like Lane Kiffin in, right? Brian Kelly is another name getting floated around, which would be comedic if he ended up at Michigan. I think as far as his big-time jobs for him, he's probably done, but it's Michigan, so who knows what exactly they'll do. I think their top guy probably besides Jed Fish would be Kenny Dillingham, right? The Arizona State head coach. He went to the playoff last year, but his alma mater is Arizona State, but just from he lost his quarterback, and from a financial backing situation, it doesn't compare to Michigan. Michigan's a much better job, and he would be there in a heartbeat if he didn't go to Arizona State. But still, I think if Michigan offered him, he probably would leave, to be completely honest with you. But they're in deep trouble, right? And they got a quarterback as a freshman that's making $20 million, right, that they backed up the Brinks truck from a donor perspective and an NIL perspective. Like, what's going to happen with him? Now, I understand he didn't play well, and he didn't really have an opportunity against Ohio State, but it didn't live up to the paycheck they were giving him. Is he going to leave? I remember he was committed to LSU for the longest time. Does he go there with Lane? I don't know if that really fits what Lane's trying to do, but your head coach goes. I mean, why would he stay, right? So that's certainly something to consider. But also I think the timing of this stinks for Michigan, and I think in 2026 they're in a world of trouble. All right, a world of trouble in 2026. But I think for the long term, this probably isn't a bad thing that he's gone, not the controversy and the way in which he left, but just the fact that they have a new coach. They went the safe route, and they said, we just won a national title. We'll just give it to the OC, which that all sounds great when you win the national title. But then it's been very clear that, I don't know if this guy's really checked out to be the head coach. And, of course, he won while he was filling in for Harbaugh, which got him a lot of confidence, right, and a lot of confidence within the university and the athletic department. And then what does he do? Last year he beats Ohio State, which kind of fooled some people, I think, nationally, and even fooled some people within Ann Arbor as well. It's like, oh, yeah, this is our guy, right? I mean, he beat him 13-10. Michigan literally didn't have a vertical passing game. They couldn't throw the ball down the field, and they just got into an ugly game and were able to edge out Ryan Day in that one. But I think, from a football perspective, this probably is not the worst thing in the world that they're going to be without Chiron Moore. It's just the timing of it is absolutely horrendous for them. Ryan Day's got to be laughing, right? For being honest, everybody at Ohio State's got to be laughing. Because they're going to be a mess this year. And, they had their little run. They won 4 games against Ohio State, won a national title in there as well. But it's hard to imagine them getting back to that level here in the foreseeable future. It'll be very interesting to see how they handle this head coach, who exactly this head coach search, who they bring in to lead him, if they go with Biff for, a year, or if they bring in another guy. I don't know. But, again, pre-NIL, this is like people are leaving all over the place to take this job. Why don't you pair it with NIL and you pair it with all the controversy around the program and all the recruiting violations and the suspensions and the inappropriate relationships with the staff member? Like, it's all bad right now in Michigan. I don't know if you're running to that job. And people want to throw Kalen DeBoer's name out there, which is like, why? Right? Why? I understand people in Tuscaloosa after the Florida State game were calling for his head. That's how it works down in the South. That's how it works when you're replacing Nick Saban. But he said no to the Penn State job, kind of laughed it off, honestly. The Michigan job's better than the Penn State job, but it's I don't know if I'd rather have that than Alabama right now, to be honest with you, with all the controversy surrounding there. So I saw he was like, it's crazy how they come up with these odds for this next head coaches or whatever, but he was like a betting favorite to be the Michigan head coach. Kalen DeBoer's not going to Michigan, right? If there was more buzz and he was like open to potentially going to Penn State, maybe, but he shut that down. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to Michigan. He's worried about Oklahoma. So just a disaster for the Wolverines, an embarrassment to their university, their athletic department, their football team, just to the maize and blue in general. People always talk about being a Michigan man. Well, Chiron, that was your guy. Is that what being a Michigan man is? Tough scene. Very tough scene for the Wolverines. And we'll continue to monitor that situation as more information comes out. But not good. Not good for Chiron Moore and Michigan. All right. There's a football game tonight. That's exciting. I wouldn't say it's the most compelling football game in the world, but it is a a divisional matchup here between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. Anytime Baker plays, I'm going to watch, right? He's fun to watch. Say what you want about him in Cleveland. I get Bengals fans when he was in Cleveland probably didn't feel great about him. Certainly Ohio State fans when he was in college didn't feel great about him either. But great success story, the way he's turned around his career and has really just embodied everything down in Tampa, and his teammates, they rally around him. It's been tremendous to watch. But, they've had a lot of injuries. They've had a lot of issues. Mike Evans, I don't know if he's back tonight, but I think he's back to practicing, which if they can get him back for the postseason would be huge. But postseason by no means a lock here. They're dueling with Carolina here in that division. Bad division, Saints, Panthers, Bucks, Falcons, not great. Falcons are 4-9, so worst division in football, but the winner obviously still gets into the playoffs here. It's a huge game. The thing about Baker is that every time he's out there, you're like, this dude isn't 100%. He's not close. And you always wonder how much it's going to hinder his ability to go out there and play winning football, and it seemingly doesn't. So I'll have a close eye on that tonight. I don't think there's anything necessarily that he's designated for on the injury report, but he's had, shoulder issues, ankle issues. Like, he's had it all this year, and he just takes serious punishment out there. He takes big-time hits and just keeps popping up and going back to work. But, I was a believer in Tampa early. I'm still a believer, right? I don't think they're a team that you necessarily want to play in the playoffs. Obviously, in the NFL, it's all about getting hot at the right time. But if Philadelphia continues to spiral, it's like, that defense is really good, but I'd kind of rather play Philadelphia than Tampa, as crazy as that sounds. But my thoughts might change if they drop this game tonight. Falcons have been a disaster. Raheem Morris, I was never a Raheem Morris guy. I didn't like the hire, and it's clearly not working. And, I think he's very much on the hot seat, should be, as should the GM that selected Michael Penix at number 8 overall. He's been hurt. He was hurt all throughout his college career. That shouldn't surprise many people. And now you're back to Kirk Cousins, and offensively you don't have much. I do think the Atlanta job, if I was a head coaching candidate, I would be really interested in the Atlanta job. One, because you look at the division, that division is wide open, right? Credit to Ben Johnson for wanting to go to Chicago, right? You're looking at that division. Green Bay, they're always good, right? Detroit, they're good. Right, and Minnesota Vikings have a great head coach, and Ben Johnson said, that's fine. I'm going to Chicago. We're going to win. Credit to him. He bet on himself. It's working. But I think there's intrigue to go into that division where it's like, play Carolina, right? Play Tampa. They're solid right now, but are they a great team? No. Right? New Orleans, they're the worst team in the league probably, besides Tennessee. So I think there's appeal to that. And there's also appeal to the defense as well. And you'll see that in the game tonight. I don't expect it to be a high-scoring game. Baker and the Bucs score a lot of points, but I think they're going to struggle a little bit scoring the football. Tonight, I still think ultimately they win and probably cover the number as well. But they've got some young guys on defense. Jesse Bates, of course, tremendous. But that James Pierce, who the Bengals had an opportunity to select at 17, instead they took Shamar Stewart. James Pierce plays good football. Keep an eye on him rushing the passer in this game. So, maybe Morris gets another year just because, he's a defensive guy and the defense is solid. But they've got all types of issues on offense. They got Kirk Cousins back there, and he doesn't look like the Kirk Cousins that, was pre-Achilles Kirk Cousins, right? And then the pick of Michael Penix really makes you scratch your head. So I think it'll be kind of a lower scoring game here tonight. I like Tampa Bay to win. I think you're going to start to see Tampa try to run the ball a little bit more. Getting Bucky back obviously is big for what they're doing offensively. But, they're going to just try to get a stranglehold on this game. They're going to take some shots when they can. They're going to pick their spots, but they're also going to try to dominate time of possession. And if you don't give Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta offense many opportunities, you're going to win the game, right? Because they're going to need extra opportunities to score some points. Like if Baker's turning the ball over, that'll give, obviously, Atlanta a shot in this game. But I think you'll see, I'm not going to say they're going to cruise to victory. I think it'll be kind of a one-score game throughout the duration of the ball game. But I do think, Tampa always feels like they have a firm grasp on, and they need this game, right? They've been dropping some games here, 7-6, tied with Carolina. Carolina has an opportunity to take control of the division if Tampa loses. So, I like Tampa to win this, but I think it'll be close. But you always feel like Tampa has control in this one. All right, a couple of more things I do want to get to before we get out of here on today's show. Got a couple of more minutes. The Baltimore Ravens. I'm not going to specifically preview the game. We'll obviously do that tomorrow. We'll preview the game. We'll do our best bets of the weekend as we always do on Friday. But is there a world here where Harbaugh is not the coach of the Baltimore Ravens next year? Hard to wrap your head around that. Because it's not like it's a 4 or 5 win team this year for Baltimore, right? They're going to probably have an opportunity or not be eliminated in the postseason hunt going into the final week of the season. They'll probably have some life. Same with Tomlin. But at some point in the NFL, you got to sit there and say, okay, yeah, we're not losing. We're not getting our butts kicked. But we're not in a spot where we can really go after a world championship here with this group. I think more specifically that applies to Pittsburgh than Baltimore. And they're not going to make a brash decision. Their ownership group is rock solid in Baltimore. DeCosta's done a really nice job for a long time. And I would be surprised if they said, you know what, John, we appreciate you, but you're gone. But I do think there could be a world where they sit down after the year and they're like, John, what are you thinking? Right? What are you thinking? Do you think you could, you still want to come back? You think you could use a change of scenery? We love you. We appreciate you. We're not going to fire you. But at the same time, if you say, you know what, I'm ready to step away and try something else, that might not be the worst decision in the world. And Pittsburgh's going to have a very similar conversation, I think, to Mike Tomlin. And it's just interesting because you watch Baltimore and there's aspects to Ravens football that are consistent throughout the course of time, right? They don't have Ed Reed and Ray Lewis flying around for them making plays anymore. I understand that. But that toughness, that physicality, being buttoned up on the defensive end is something that is carried through with this organization regardless of those guys no longer playing. And this year at times it's like, well, yeah, Kyle Hamilton's really good, but you traded away Oweh to your brother, right? And you just got some guys on that defense that's like, I don't know if how I really feel about those guys out there defensively. So it'll be interesting to monitor what exactly Baltimore does this offseason. I think Lamar, clearly not healthy, but nobody's healthy in the NFL at this point. Joe Burrow, he's only played a few games, but he's not healthy, right? He's not fully moving around like we're used to see Joe Burrow moving around. And I think he's got some bumps and bruises from the 2 games in which he played. So, great quarterbacks are able to overcome that and still play really good football when they're banged up. And Lamar's been one of those guys where it's like, yeah, first couple weeks of the season, he's flying around, running extended plays. He looks great. But this has kind of been like a reoccurring theme a little bit here with Lamar, where you get later in the year and you get to the playoffs, and you remember that championship game against Kansas City, which they did a lot of bad things in that game. But, like, you're watching Lamar, and you're like, he's not moving around like you're used to seeing Lamar Jackson move around. And he's certainly not right now with the injuries that he's playing through. So credit to him for playing through it, but I don't know. He really might have to alter his game, and he has, right? Remember when he first got in here, he was running all over the place, and he's changed that now. But is he really – I mean, people – when you say, oh, top 5 quarterbacks, people love saying it. We did it on Off the Bench earlier this week. Pretty much everybody includes Lamar Jackson, and rightfully so. But if he really has to change and start running even less than he does, I don't know if he's a shoo-in to be in that category anymore. So, I think Harbaugh, at the end of the day, I mentioned him like, do you want to try something else, go in a different direction? I think he understands how rare it is to have a talent like Lamar, and I think he would choose to stick around. I think ultimately they'll keep him. But when you talk about some of these elite quarterbacks, like you never saw Tom Brady miss the playoffs. You never saw Peyton Manning miss the playoffs, right? We're seeing Joe Burrow miss the playoffs, and Lamar Jackson might miss the playoffs too. That shouldn't happen. When you have a position like the quarterback position that is so valuable and so important, there should never be a situation where a guy makes it through the whole year. And I know Lamar missed some time, but he's playing at the end of the year, he's playing a lot of games, playing, solid football in Joe Burrow's case, playing great football, right? And then missing the playoffs. And you might have a situation where Mahomes, Jackson, and Burrow are all out. So I think there's more of a likelihood that Tomlin and the Steelers go in a different direction than Harbaugh and the Ravens. But let me be very clear here. I don't think you're going to see one of these GMs or one of these ownership groups come out and say, sorry, you're done. I just don't see that happening. They sit down and have a conversation about, you want to go in a different direction, or, it wouldn't be the end of the world if you left. What are you thinking? Kind of get their thoughts. I think that could happen. But as far as sitting them down after the end of the year and saying, yep, thanks for your services, but we're done with you, I don't think that's going to happen for Taylor, or I guess we can get to him in a second, but for Tomlin and Harbaugh there as well. Bengals, of course, play the Ravens on Sunday. Looking forward to that. I will be in attendance down there at Paycor Stadium as they try to keep their playoff hopes alive. But let's be real here. Probably not going to happen. But, I expect this to be a great game. It always is when Bengals and Ravens play. Obviously, on Thanksgiving, it was a little bit more one-sided in favor of Cincinnati. But it's going to be cold, right? I saw the low was 0 degrees and the high was like 13 degrees on Sunday. So it's going to be freezing. Joe talked about yesterday about the cold. If it's just cold, not going to affect too much what they do offensively. But the Bengals defense, we'll see what they can do. They played better, obviously, against Baltimore, but they had 5 turnovers in the game. Wouldn't count on Lamar Jackson in Baltimore turning it over 5 times in this one. We'll have a full detailed preview on our show tomorrow, so certainly looking forward to that. And, a great show today. We appreciate Travis Steele stopping by, head coach of the Miami Redhawks basketball team. They're off to an undefeated start. Big-time win last night against UNC Asheville. That will be out on YouTube and in podcast form later today, so make sure you check that out. Also, Reed Mouse off the bench early today at 10 o'clock. Had Richard Pitino on, and that was a great conversation. That will be up on YouTube and in podcast form there as well. So a couple of great guests here locally, and, we're doing everything we can to really get some good guests here on the show. Hopefully next week we can have a loaded guest list there as well. But we certainly appreciate Richard Pitino and Travis Steele for stopping by and making some time. Very hectic time of the year, very busy. Xavier's getting ready for a matchup tomorrow, and Miami, of course, getting back late last night from a game. And, how about that? How about the Redhawks? I understand they haven't, played necessarily top-end teams, but to go out there and win, and they're not just winning. I know it was an overtime win last night, but you look at some of the games previously, they're beating the crud out of teams. And, Travis Steele, I remember I graduated from Miami in 23, so I was around the team a little bit, covered the team a little bit, and just kind of Travis, what he said today, he was saying back then about, we need some patience here. We're not just going to go all in on the portal. I'm going to recruit guys. I'm going to develop guys. It's going to take a few years. And you're all like, okay, yeah, we'll see. Like, is that really going to happen, or is that just words? It's coming to fruition in front of our very eyes here as they made a deep run in the MAC tournament last year, played Akron, lost at the buzzer, were winning the entire game. That was very heartbreaking. But I think some of that momentum has transferred over to this year, and they got Sudter back. as well. He spent a couple of years at Bellarmine. He was awesome, and a great soundbite from Coach Steele about how he came into his office at the end of last year and was like, I ain't going anywhere. I love it here. Absolutely love it. And preseason MAC first team. He's a great player. He's banged up. I don't know if he was injured in the game last night or he's kind of just been dealing with it, fouled out early, but really encourage you to watch the Red Hawks and watch Peter Sudter because he can flat out play. Got some other good guys on the team. Perry, of course, the freshman from Lakota East. He comes off the bench, gives them some valuable minutes as well. So credit to Travis Steele. He's done a tremendous job. And I think, once he was done at Xavier, the expectation coming to Miami, it was like, what are you going to do here with less resources and less top-of-the-line recruits? And he's built this thing up. They've been patient with him. He's been patient, and it's been great. It's really blossoming in front of everyone's eyes. So keep an eye on the Red Hawks. In the MAC, pretty much got to win your conference tournament in order to get into the dance. They were right there last year and have an opportunity certainly to follow that up this year and hopefully end up on the smiling side of the scoreboard. Appreciate everyone, as always, for hanging out. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. We just hit 21,000 subscribers here at the channel. That's awesome. We appreciate you. Pat on the back to each and every one of you guys. And, the goal here is to get over, get 1,000 every couple of weeks here. So 22,000 certainly our next goal. We'll do a better job of doing some sub-reads in some of our segments that go out on YouTube. We'll figure out how to execute that a little bit better. But if you're watching and you're new, help us out. We got content here throughout the duration of the week. Our guys, Craig Sandlin and others, Mike Hart, our whole Chatterbox Bengals crew, got you covered on the weekends there as well. So it's really a 7-day operation here all throughout the year. Reds obviously aren't playing, but there's been a ton of Reds conversation here recently, and we'll try to get somebody on the show next week that covers the Cincinnati Reds. And, looking forward to that conversation. But, if you're new here, we got you covered content-wise each and every day throughout the year. So subscribe, help us out, and we'll continue to try to grow this thing here at Chatterbox Sports. But appreciate everyone as always, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.